Hey guys, welcome to Horse to Cinema. My name is Jackson, and I just wanted to kind of first of all, before I get into the review, just kind of explain a little bit what this channel is. So I've been really into film for a long time, and I've for a while I've kind of wanted to be a part of the dialogue on YouTube about just the conversation on movies. There are a lot of really great movie reviewers and movie channels that I admire, and I kind of wanted to make my own version of that in a way. So. That'll be really what this channel is, reviews, eventually discussions of some of my favorite movies, and just kind of conversations on film in general. So yeah, you can look forward to more of that in the future. Today, we're going to be doing the first movie review on my channel, and that review is going to be for The French Dispatch, directed by Wes Anderson. So Wes Anderson is a filmmaker I really admire. I've only seen a few of his movies. This is the third one I've seen. I've also seen Moonrise Kingdom and The Grand Budapest Hotel, the latter of which being really kind of one of my favorite movies of all time. I'm sure I'll do a review of that one day. And one thing I love about Wes Anderson is that with some directors, of course, most directors, if not all, have a style. And with most of these directors, you can, whether it's a certain way that they write dialogue, a certain type of music they like to put in their film, the way they direct action sequences, you can generally tell that this is their movie within just by watching some amount of it. But what I love about Wes Anderson is that whereas some film directors, it takes a while or they need to have a certain thing in there to make you realize that it's their movie. Wes Anderson, you know, within the first frame of the movie, this is a Wes Anderson movie. And this movie is no different. As soon as the screen comes on, you know exactly what you're in for here. And I loved it. I described this to a friend afterwards that this is the most Wes Anderson movie possible, because it's really him at his most audacious, because it's not just him doing his usual style. It's also him telling a story in a structure that's not very traditional, and in a way that even I hadn't really seen him try to do before. So this movie is essentially 3 different acts. It follows the journeys of different journalists who work for this paper, the editor of which has recently died. Now the paper is basically going to be shut down. And it recaps 3 different stories that sort of talk about the importance of journalism and the importance of the written word more generally. As usual with any Wes Anderson movie, the cinematography and the color palettes, just the way the movie looks in general, is so easy on the eyes. It's just an amazing movie to look at. There are a lot of transitions between black and white and back to color, and the colors are very vibrant. They very much stand out on the screen. You can always tell that he's going for a particular mood when he has a certain kind of color on screen. Another thing I really like about Wes Anderson is that he tends to have a lot of the sets that he has. They intentionally don't look that natural. They don't really look like places that people live in, especially in this movie, because in this movie there's a couple of scenes where the sets not only look like they're essentially on the set of a play, but in one scene it literally is on the set of a play. So I would guess that he really has an admiration not only for the spoken word, like with this film, but also theater and films in general. And again, like his other movies, this is really wonderfully directed. The camera movement choices that he wants to employ are really, really entertaining, and they make the audience so much more invested in every scene than if it was just sort of shot and directed like a normal film. He really likes to exercise pans, for example. There are a lot of really, really entertaining ones in this movie, very similar to Moonrise Kingdom and Grand Budapest Hotel as well. One of my favorite shots in this movie is that there's a sequence involving a wheelchair chase. I won't really spoil it much more than that, but essentially the camera is positioned behind the person in the wheelchair, and you get to see his head, and it's almost a point of view shot. But the fact that his head is in the shot really just adds this extra level of humor to it. It's kind of just absurd and just wonderful to look at. There's some really good performances in this movie too. I really liked Benicio del Toro, who plays this prisoner who's also an artist, and a lot of people are taking interest in his art. And that's kind of like where the story stems from. Jeffrey Wright as well is really, really good. He plays a journalist who has historically covers food, and I think more than any other character in the movie, he's kind of the character who Wes Anderson sort of speaks through when he talks about what he really wants to do with this film, which to me is kind of an ode to journalism, an ode to the idea of the spoken word. His character essentially has a memory that he basically remembers everything he's ever written perfectly, and he can recite it at any time. And I think that kind of allows Anderson to sort of speak sort of his thoughts on this subject of the importance of literature, essentially. It really is cool to see somebody who is so passionate about something that they're willing to make this really like artsy film with this issue under the surface. There really aren't a lot of movies like this out these days, and I really it was a privilege to be able to see this. Now that being said, there are a couple issues I have with this movie. It's not perfect. So namely the structure I talked about earlier, the style of it, because it's sort of three different stories that are, I would say, around maybe 20 to 25 minutes each. It never really gets to flash out any of individual character and talk about them in depth. It's very much an ensemble cast. There are a lot of really big names in this movie, but even though there are a lot of interesting and compelling characters, the movie doesn't really care to flesh out any of them. And that's very much the intent. It's not a flaw in the sense of he sort of failed in this realm, but it's something that the audience might take issue with if you like to see really deep, well fleshed out characters. Again, the three story structure, I would say that one of those three stories is not as compelling as the other two. I'm not going to say which if you are interested in seeing this movie, but to me, that one kind of stuck out a little bit. And while I really, really like the other two, it sort of, it took me out of the movie a little bit. It was a little bit hard to follow, and I couldn't quite see where he was going with it like I could with the other two. So yeah, my issues with this movie just really stem from the untraditional structure of it and how that could leave a sour taste in the mouths of some people. I sort of get where he was going with it, but to me, it does make for a little bit less compelling of a story than even he normally writes. I really enjoyed the story of Grand Budapest Hotel, not just the spectacle. So it's not my favorite film of his, but it's very enjoyable. So yeah, this has been my review for The French Dispatch. I was really glad to review, for my first movie review on this channel, to be a movie that I thoroughly enjoyed by a director that I really admire. I'm going to be doing more movie reviews in the future. And then, of course, I'm going to probably do some topics about my favorite movies, things along those lines. So if you're interested in that sort of stuff, you can go ahead and subscribe down below, and I'll see you in the next video.